I stepped into my garage after 6 months overseas, and my heart stopped. Dead silence hit me like a punch. No warm scent of motor oil and old leather, just bare concrete and dust where my classics used to sit. They were gone. All three. Stolen. While I was deployed serving my country, HOA President Veronica Grimm had them towed to a junkyard for scrap. Over $180,000 in American muscle, my grandfather's final gift, the cars he poured his heart into, sold for just $3,000. Security footage showed her by her white BMW, arms crossed, smirking as the tow trucks dragged them away like trash. She thought she'd gotten away with it. But she didn't know I returned with federal authority from a task force investigating HOA fraud. I still had the badge. What would you do if someone destroyed your grandfather's dying gift while you were deployed? Comment below and tell me where you're watching from, because this ends with that Karen in handcuffs. Ezra Blackwood was the kind of man who could diagnose engine trouble just by the sound of an idle. Former Marine turned federal building inspector, he'd inherited 3 classics from his grandfather Joe. But they weren't just cars. They were summer afternoons spent elbow-deep in engine grease, the metallic ping of cooling headers, and the old man's rough hands guiding his on a socket wrench. Measure twice, tighten once, Grandpa Joe used to say, tobacco breath mixing with motor oil fumes in that cramped garage. When Joe died 2 years ago, those cars became Ezra's cathedral. His 1967 Mustang, 1970 Chevelle, and 1969 Camaro, sitting under custom covers like sleeping giants. Then came Veronica Grimm. Picture a woman who'd never worked a day in her life, inherited pharmaceutical money from a husband who'd died in a car accident 2 days before his Medicare fraud trial, and decided that tragedy made her qualified to run other people's lives. She drove a spotless white BMW that reeked of vanilla air freshener, carried a purse worth more than most people's rent, and had appointed herself Willowbrook Estates neighborhood quality curator. Translation, professional bully with too much time and blood money. From day one, Veronica had Ezra in her crosshairs. First complaint, his work truck was a commercial vehicle disturbing residential tranquility. Second complaint, his American flag was excessively patriotic and potentially offensive. Third complaint, evening garage time was disrupting dinner hours with the heinous crime of tightening bolts. But Veronica's masterpiece came 6 months ago. She called an emergency HOA meeting to push through new rules requiring all recreational vehicles to be stored in enclosed structures. The meeting happened on a Tuesday night when most people were working or handling kids' homework. 4 people showed up. 4. Out of 127 households. Veronica and 3 hand-picked cronies voted 3-1 to approve storage requirements with a 90-day compliance deadline. That's 3% of the neighborhood making rules for everybody else. But hey, it was legal because proper notification wasn't required for emergency votes. Knowledge nugget. Most HOA covenants require 60% majority votes for rule changes affecting property rights. Emergency meetings without proper community notification violate quorum requirements. Takeaway. Emergency votes can't override foundational property rights without legitimate majority consent. Always verify your original covenant language. Ezra filed a formal complaint before deployment, figuring the legal system would handle it while he served overseas. The cars were perfectly legal under the original covenant, stored under professional covers, completely compliant with existing rules. That was his mistake, assuming Veronica followed rules. 3 weeks into his deployment, Veronica struck. She had Granger salvage tow all 3 cars, claiming they were abandoned property after 90 days of non-compliance. Never mind that Ezra was serving his country, never mind the original covenant. She forged his signature on towing authorization and pocketed the $3,000 salvage payment for administrative costs. His neighbor Delilah Thornton had been watching everything with sharp gray eyes. Retired teacher, widow, the kind of woman who documented injustice like evidence for court. While Ezra was deployed, she'd secretly recorded Veronica's victory celebrations, bragging to mailbox clusters about finally cleaning up the military trash and teaching that soldier boy who really runs this neighborhood. Those recordings would prove crucial later. The night before leaving for deployment, Ezra had walked through his garage one final time. The Mustang's hood was still warm, chrome bumper reflecting fluorescent lights. He'd pressed his palm against the cracked leather steering wheel, still holding impressions of his grandfather's hands, and promised he'd finish the engine restoration when he returned. The garage had smelled like Old Spice cologne mixed with motor oil, hope, and Sunday afternoon dreams. Now it just smelled like betrayal and empty concrete. But Veronica had miscalculated badly. She'd assumed Ezra was just another veteran she could steamroll with paperwork and fraud. She had no idea about the federal building inspector badge in his wallet, or the specialized training in investigating municipal corruption. Some people file complaints, others file lawsuits. Ezra was about to file federal charges. When Ezra marched up to Veronica's front door demanding answers, she was watering her prize-winning petunias like nothing had happened. The sweet, cloying scent of fertilizer mixed with her expensive perfume made his stomach turn, the kind of artificial sweetness that masked something rotten underneath. "Oh, Ezra," she chirped, not even looking up from her flowers. "Welcome home. I hope you don't mind, but we had to clean up some neighborhood violations while you were away serving." The way she said serving dripped with condescension, like he'd been on vacation instead of deployed overseas. "Where are my cars, Veronica?" She finally turned, designer sunglasses reflecting his rage back at him. "Your abandoned vehicles? Oh, honey, those old junkers were towed per proper HOA procedures. Granger's Salvage handled the removal. Very professional operation." Ezra's military training kicked in. Stay calm, gather intelligence, document everything. But the metallic taste of rage was already filling his mouth. Those weren't abandoned. They were legally parked under the original covenant. Veronica's smile could have cut glass. "Emergency rules supersede old agreements, dear. We voted on new storage requirements months ago." She gestured toward a faded notice taped to the community mailbox. So small you'd need a magnifying glass to read the fine print. That's when she produced the paperwork. A crisp manila folder containing what looked like legal towing authorization, complete with signatures and official seals. At the bottom, in blue ink, Ezra's signature authorizing the removal and sale of all 3 vehicles. Except Ezra had never signed anything. He remembered from his grandfather's legal troubles years ago, always use black ink for important documents. Blue fades and can be disputed in court. His signature was always black without exception. "This is forged," he said, voice steady despite the rage building in his chest. "Oh my," Veronica gasped, clutching her pearls with theatrical precision. "That's a very serious accusation." "I certainly hope you're not threatening me, Ezra. We've had problems with unstable veterans before." The threat was crystal clear. One phone call from her, and he'd be facing harassment charges before he could blink. Ezra pocketed his phone after photographing every document, noting how Veronica's hand trembled slightly when the camera clicked. Guilty people always flinched at evidence. "We'll see what Granger's Salvage has to say about this." 20 minutes later, he was standing in ankle-deep mud at Granger's Salvage, breathing diesel fumes and the metallic stench of crushed dreams. The salvage yard sprawled across 5 acres of organized chaos, towers of twisted metal reaching toward gray skies like mechanical tombstones. Hank Granger emerged from a rusted trailer, wiping grease-stained hands on coveralls that had seen better decades. His nicotine-stained fingers trembled as he lit another cigarette, and Ezra noticed fresh scratch marks around the office door lock. Someone had been here recently, someone in a hurry. "You the owner of them classic cars?" Hank's voice carried the gravelly rasp of 40 years' worth of unfiltered cigarettes. "Where are they?" Hank's eyes darted toward a mountain of compressed metal cubes. "Well now, see, that's complicated. The lady said you'd signed off on everything. Said you needed quick cash for some emergency." Ezra's heart stopped. They walked past towers of rusted chrome and shattered windshields, their boots squelching through oil-soaked mud in a funeral march for automotive history. The acrid smell of motor oil and rust filled his nostrils, so different from the clean, hopeful scent of his grandfather's garage. Then Hank pointed to a stack of metal cubes, each about the size of a washing machine. "That one there? That was your Chevelle. Beautiful car. Shame, really." He gestured toward the car crusher, where twisted blue metal was being loaded onto a flatbed. "The Mustang got processed yesterday." But something was wrong with the math. "You said 3 cars," Ezra managed through the rage choking his throat. Hank's eyes went shifty, cigarette ash falling onto his boots. "Well, see, that's where things get complicated. The Camaro, that one with the racing stripes, it ain't here no more." "What do you mean?" "Lady came by yesterday morning real upset. Said there'd been a mistake. That particular car wasn't supposed to be scrapped. Had some fancy paperwork about correcting administrative errors. Paid me $500 cash to release it to some collector friend of hers. As Hank rambled about paperwork, Ezra was photographing everything: the forged documents, the crushed remains, the suspicious gaps in the story. But then he heard something that made his blood freeze: the distinctive rumble of a modified V8 engine. The exact sound his grandfather had spent 3 summers perfecting in that Camaro. He spun around just in time to see familiar racing stripes disappearing around the back corner of the salvage yard. Someone was driving his car, right now. His grandfather's masterpiece was rolling away while he stood there talking to a nervous salvage dealer. "Hank," Ezra's voice carried the quiet menace of a man who'd learned interrogation techniques from Marine instructors. "I think we need to discuss who's really running this operation." But Hank was already backing toward his trailer, hands raised like Ezra was pointing a weapon instead of a camera. The sound of his Camaro faded into the distance, and Ezra realized this wasn't just neighborhood harassment. This was organized theft, and Veronica was just the smiling face of something much darker. The certified mail envelope arrived 3 days later, thick enough to choke a horse. Ezra could feel the expensive papers weight through the manila, the kind of legal stationery that cost more per sheet than most people spent on lunch. The return address read, Kellerman and Associates, in gold-embossed letters that practically screamed, "We have more money than your entire bloodline will ever see." Inside, a restraining order application painted him as an unstable veteran with documented PTSD, who'd been aggressively stalking neighborhood residents and making veiled threats about specialized military training. Someone had twisted every photograph he'd taken, every question he'd asked, into a narrative of escalating mental breakdown. The attached police report even included witness statements from neighbors who'd apparently seen him acting erratically and mumbling about government conspiracies. Funny thing was, Ezra recognized those neighbors. They were the same 3 people who'd voted with Veronica in that sham HOA meeting. But that afternoon, salvation arrived in the form of Delilah Thornton. His 78-year-old neighbor knocked on his door, her arthritis-gnarled hands clutching a worn manila folder like it contained nuclear launch codes. "Ezra, dear, I think you need to see this." Her voice carried the careful precision of someone who'd spent 40 years teaching 8th graders to document their sources. "I've been keeping very detailed records." Inside her folder, photographs with timestamps, printed emails, and most beautiful of all, a small digital recorder that had been capturing Veronica's bragging sessions for months. Delilah's hawk-sharp eyes had missed absolutely nothing. She pressed play on a conversation recorded 2 weeks prior, the audio quality crystal clear, Veronica's voice dripping with satisfaction. The Navy pilot was almost too easy. 8-month deployment came back to find his Harley abandoned under our new vehicle storage requirements. "Granger paid $300. I sold it privately for $12,000. These military boys never learn." Male voice, nervous. "What about that Coast Guard mechanic's boat?" Veronica, actually laughing. "Oh, Marcus was my masterpiece. Maritime safety violation on private property sounds so official. Granger towed it for disposal costs, but I'd already found a Miami buyer. $30,000 yacht for a $2,000 administrative fee." The blood drained from Ezra's face as the scope became clear. This wasn't random harassment. It was systematic targeting of deployed military personnel who couldn't defend their property. Veronica had weaponized HOA authority into a theft syndicate. "How many others, Delilah?" Her folder revealed the criminal enterprise: Navy pilot's vintage motorcycle, Army sergeant's custom truck, Coast Guard mechanic's restored yacht, Marine's grandfather's tool collection, all stolen during deployments, all sold for fractions of their value while owners served overseas. "Over $400,000 in stolen property," Delilah whispered, her teacher's voice steady despite the magnitude. "But I'm just one old woman with a digital recorder. Who believes the widow with cats against pharmaceutical money?" That's when Ezra's federal training kicked in. He'd once investigated municipal fraud where officials used public funds for personal expenses, automatic IRS referral when amounts exceeded federal thresholds, plus Treasury Department money laundering protocols for complex financial patterns. Has Veronica been creative with HOA finances? Delilah's eyes gleamed like a prosecutor who'd just found the smoking gun. "Oh, honey, you should see her accounting creativity. Neighborhood beautification funded her kitchen renovation. Security consulting purchased that BMW. Legal administrative costs covered harassment lawsuits against 3 different families. As Delilah spread financial documents across his kitchen table, the coffee growing cold while they worked, Ezra spotted something that made his federal investigator training sing. Veronica wasn't just stealing and spending, she was laundering everything through legitimate HOA transactions, then transferring clean money to offshore accounts. Delilah, what do you know about her husband's death? Car accident, very convenient timing. 2 days before his federal trial for Medicare fraud. $2.3 million in embezzled payments, all charges died with him. She pulled out newspaper clippings, insurance reports, federal court documents. Veronica inherited dirty money and spent 3 years washing it through military theft. The pattern crystallized with terrifying clarity. Pharmaceutical inheritance was cover story. Her late husband had embezzled millions before his suspicious accident. Veronica had inherited blood money and built a systematic operation. Target deployed military families, steal valuable property during their absence, launder proceeds through fake HOA improvements, transfer clean funds offshore. But then she'd made her fatal mistake. Ezra's phone buzzed. Drop this harassment campaign immediately or face serious consequences. Some accidents cannot be prevented, as my late husband discovered. The threat was explicit, but Veronica had just committed felony intimidation of a federal employee. That text message was evidence of obstruction of justice, witness tampering, and criminal conspiracy. Ezra looked at Delilah's meticulously organized evidence, then at his federal credentials, then at the threatening text that would bury Veronica in federal court. For the first time since discovering his empty garage, he smiled. She thought pharmaceutical money and intimidation made her untouchable. She had no idea she'd just threatened someone with direct pipeline to Treasury criminal investigators, IRS enforcement, and federal prosecutors, who lived for cases exactly like this. By morning, Veronica had unleashed social media hell. Ezra's phone buzzed like an angry wasp as neighbors tagged him in Facebook posts that painted him as the neighborhood psychopath. The smell of his morning coffee turned bitter as he scrolled through carefully crafted character assassination. Screenshots of his stalking behavior complete with grainy security footage that made his evidence gathering look like the prelude to a home invasion. "Dangerous veteran terrorizes peaceful community," screamed her post header, accompanied by doctored video clips showing him photographing houses at suspicious hours. Never mind that he'd been documenting illegal activity in broad daylight. Veronica's editing made it look like midnight reconnaissance missions. The comments section exploded like a digital lynch mob. Sarah Martinez. "I've seen him lurking around taking pictures. My children refuse to play outside anymore." Bob Rory. "These PTSD cases can snap without warning. Remember that incident in Riverside last month?" Jennifer Walsh. "Why isn't our HOA protecting law-abiding families from clearly unstable individuals?" Each comment felt like a knife twist. Within hours, neighbors who'd chatted over backyard fences were crossing streets to avoid him. The mailman started leaving packages at the curb instead of walking to his door. Even kids stopped riding bikes past his house. Veronica had turned an entire community against him with surgical precision. The woman understood psychological warfare better than most military strategists, which, considering her pharmaceutical background, probably wasn't coincidental. But while she was busy destroying his reputation, Ezra was using those federal inspector credentials to dive deep into county financial records. What he discovered made his hands shake with more than just caffeine. The courthouse database revealed a web of shell companies with names like Willowbrook Enhancement Services and Community Beautification LLC, all registered to Veronica's address, all receiving HOA payments for services that existed only on paper. Phantom landscape improvements, imaginary security consultations, administrative fees that perfectly matched her personal credit card statements. She'd been systematically embezzling HOA funds for 3 years, using military theft as cover for massive financial fraud. The numbers were staggering. 89,000 in questionable HOA transactions, plus unreported income from property sales that should have triggered automatic IRS investigations. But the real revelation came from cross-referencing Treasury databases with her late husband's pharmaceutical records. His company had been under federal investigation for Medicare fraud when he died in that suspiciously convenient accident. Insurance investigators had noted brake line failures on a perfectly maintained vehicle, timing that eliminated the government's key witness exactly 48 hours before trial testimony. Veronica hadn't just inherited dirty money, she'd likely orchestrated the cover-up that protected it. As Ezra photographed document after document, his basement transforming into something that looked like a federal task force operation, his phone rang with an unfamiliar number. "Mr. Blackwood, Marcus Rory, investigative reporter with Channel 7. I've been tracking HOA corruption stories, and your situation has some interesting parallels to cases I'm already investigating." Apparently, Veronica's social media nuclear option had backfired spectacularly. Instead of silencing him, her public hysteria had attracted exactly the kind of journalistic attention she couldn't afford. Her frantic accusations had triggered media curiosity about what she was so desperately trying to hide. "I might have information that could help your investigation," Ezra said carefully. "Information about systematic targeting of deployed military personnel, about HOA funds being diverted through shell companies, about a pharmaceutical heiress whose inheritance came from some very questionable circumstances." Marcus had clearly done extensive homework. This wasn't random fishing. Someone had already briefed him on financial fraud patterns, and Veronica's panicked damage control had confirmed his suspicions. That evening, as Ezra organized evidence in his basement, walls now papered with financial charts that would make FBI analysts proud, his doorbell chimed. Through the peephole, two figures in dark suits with the unmistakable bearing of federal law enforcement, not lawyers or process servers. These were agents, the kind who investigated white-collar crime for Treasury Department task forces. "Mr. Blackwood, Agent Patricia Valdez, IRS Criminal Investigation Division. We understand you've uncovered financial irregularities that intersect with our ongoing investigation into municipal fraud networks." The pieces crystallized with beautiful clarity. His federal inspector database access had triggered automatic monitoring systems. Treasury computers had flagged someone investigating the same financial patterns they'd been tracking across multiple jurisdictions. His evidence gathering hadn't just exposed Veronica's local crimes. It had intersected with a massive federal investigation into organized HOA fraud. "Mrs. Grimm's activities appear to be part of a larger criminal enterprise we've been tracking across 7 states, Agent Valdez continued, her voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who'd built careers on cases like this. "Would you be willing to cooperate with federal prosecutors?" Ezra looked at his basement war room, then at federal agents who'd just confirmed that Veronica's reach extended far beyond Willowbrook Estates, then at his phone still buzzing with social media attacks calling him unstable. "Agent Valdez," he said, stepping aside to reveal walls covered in evidence. "I think you're going to find this absolutely fascinating." Agent Valdez spread federal files across Ezra's kitchen table, and the musty smell of official documents mixed with cold coffee created an atmosphere that felt like a war council. What she revealed made Ezra's grandfather's purple heart, still sitting on the mantel, seem to burn with righteous anger. "The original HOA covenant you mentioned?" Agent Valdez pulled out a leather-bound document that looked like it belonged in the National Archives. Treasury forensic accountants examined Willowbrook's founding papers. Mrs. Grimm never had legal authority to touch anyone's property. Ezra's hands trembled as he read the smoking gun buried in 1987 covenant language. Any policy affecting property rights required 60% majority vote of all 127 households, not just whoever bothered showing up to emergency meetings. Veronica's entire storage rule was legally void from the moment she'd invented it. "She's been committing grand theft under color of authority," Agent Valdez said, her voice carrying the quiet fury of someone who'd seen too many crimes against the people she'd sworn to protect. "Using fake legal procedures to steal from families serving their country." But the deeper truth was more chilling than simple theft. Veronica's late husband hadn't just embezzled Medicare funds, he'd been laundering money through pharmaceutical shell companies for years. When federal investigators closed in, his convenient brake line failure had eliminated their star witness and protected $7 million in hidden offshore accounts. "We believe Mrs. Grimm orchestrated her husband's murder," Agent Valdez said quietly, watching Ezra's face. "Precise timing, sole beneficiary of insurance policies taken out 6 months before his death. But proving spousal homicide 3 years later is nearly impossible." Instead, she'd moved to Willowbrook and perfected a new scam with military precision. Target deployed personnel who couldn't defend their property, use fake HOA authority to legitimize theft, launder proceeds through shell companies disguised as community improvements, transfer clean money to her dead husband's offshore accounts. The scope was breathtaking. 47 identified victims across 7 states. Navy pilots losing vintage motorcycles, Army mechanics stripped of custom vehicles, Marine engineers finding restored boats, disposed of during deployment, Coast Guard families returning to empty driveways and forged paperwork. Combined theft totals over $4 million, Agent Valdez continued. She's personally profited nearly $2 million after paying accomplices like your friend Hank Granger. But what made Ezra's blood turn to ice were the intercepted recordings. Veronica's voice discussing military personnel like they were vermin. These government slaves deserve whatever happens to them. No one cares about broken soldiers anyway. Society's better off when they learn their proper place. The pharmaceutical heiress didn't just steal for money. She targeted military families because she genuinely believed service members were disposable government property beneath her inherited social class. This wasn't just crime. It was ideologically motivated warfare against the people who protected her freedom to commit it. She made one fatal mistake targeting you. Agent Valdez smiled with predatory satisfaction. Federal building inspectors have database access that exposed connections we'd been chasing for months. Your grandfather's cars weren't just stolen. They were the thread that unraveled a multi-million-dollar criminal enterprise. Ezra looked at his grandfather's Purple Heart catching afternoon light through the kitchen window, then at federal evidence proving that his family's legacy had become the key to protecting dozens of other military families. The power dynamic had shifted completely. Veronica thought she was untouchable behind pharmaceutical money and fake legal authority. She had no idea that stealing from the wrong veteran had connected her current crimes to her husband's old money laundering networks. Same offshore accounts, same shell companies, same banking protocols. We have enough evidence to charge organized crime, conspiracy, interstate theft, and money laundering, Agent Valdez concluded. But we want maximum public exposure to protect future victims. She leaned forward, eyes intense. How would you feel about helping us destroy her in front of the entire community? Ezra's basement transformed overnight into something that would make Pentagon war rooms jealous. Federal case files spread across folding tables like battle plans, timeline charts covered every wall with the precision of a NASA launch sequence, and the satisfying scratch of dry erase markers provided soundtrack to systematic justice preparation. The smell of fresh coffee mixed with the metallic scent of determination and impending victory. We coordinate this like a special ops mission, Agent Valdez explained, pointing to a color-coded timeline that looked like it belonged in a Tom Clancy novel. 3 simultaneous strikes, legal, financial, and public exposure, all hitting at maximum impact during Veronica's moment of triumph. The legal trap was surgical in its elegance. IRS criminal investigation would coordinate arrest warrant execution with Veronica's annual HOA presentation. While she basked in applause for another year of successful community leadership, federal marshals would be positioning outside like wolves circling prey. Ezra had learned during his building inspection training that timing was everything in federal operations. Too early and targets could destroy evidence. Too late and assets disappeared into offshore accounts faster than morning mist. They'd strike at the exact moment Veronica felt most secure, most untouchable. She's been promoting this meeting for weeks, Agent Valdez noted with predatory satisfaction, calling it her legacy celebration, perfect stage for federal justice. The financial component required split-second coordination across multiple jurisdictions. Treasury investigators had identified 12 offshore accounts still moving stolen money, plus 4 shell companies laundering proceeds through fake community improvements. They'd execute simultaneous asset freezes the moment handcuffs clicked, ensuring not one stolen dollar could escape into international banking networks. But Ezra's favorite element was the technical presentation. Marcus Rory had partnered with a forensic accountant who specialized in making complex financial crimes visually comprehensible for juries. Together, they'd created a digital slideshow that would expose every stolen car, every forged signature, every fraudulent transaction with courtroom-quality documentation. The key insight from federal building inspection work proved crucial here. Most fraud investigations failed because evidence was too complex for public understanding. But showing stolen military vehicles next to corresponding bank transfers, forged documents beside authentic signatures, made criminal patterns immediately obvious even to financial laypeople. We're calling it Operation Grandfather's Revenge. Marcus explained during their final coordination meeting, and Ezra felt his throat tighten with unexpected emotion. Your family's legacy becomes the foundation that protects hundreds of other military families. Rallying allies required delicate choreography. Delilah agreed to present her secret recordings publicly, finally emerging from shadow witness to star testimony. The other military victims, Navy pilot Jackson Torres, Army Sergeant Maria Santos, Coast Guard mechanic David Kim, would attend in full-dress uniform, creating powerful visual testimony about exactly whom Veronica had targeted for systematic theft. When that audience sees 4 veterans in ceremonial uniform, Agent Valdez smiled with tactical satisfaction. They'll understand precisely what kind of predator they've been living under. The legal knowledge they'd assembled provided devastating advantages that most fraud victims never discovered. The Service Members Civil Relief Act offered special federal protections for military property during deployments. Violating SCRA triggered automatic federal penalties, including treble damages and criminal charges for knowing violations. Veronica's systematic targeting of deployed personnel had created violations that could result in decades of federal imprisonment. Using HOA authority to commit theft qualified as theft under color of authority, a federal crime when crossing state lines. Since Veronica had operated across multiple jurisdictions, every theft became a federal offense with enhanced sentencing guidelines. Federal building inspectors possessed access to municipal compliance records unavailable to typical citizens. Cross-referencing HOA financial filings with actual community expenditures had exposed systematic fraud that state investigators had missed for years. Sometimes the right credentials opened doors that revealed entire criminal enterprises. The community building element brought unexpected emotional resonance. Recovered funds from similar federal cases typically funded victim support programs, but Agent Valdez proposed something more ambitious. The Grandfather Joe Memorial Fund would provide legal protection and property monitoring for military families during future deployments. Your grandfather's stolen cars become guardian angels protecting hundreds of other veterans, she explained, and Ezra felt his grandfather's presence in that basement war room. His legacy transforms from theft victim to protector of those who serve. The psychological strategy was equally satisfying. Veronica expected broken veterans who'd crumble under legal intimidation and social media pressure. She had no conception she was facing federal investigators who'd spent months building an airtight case, supported by military veterans who understood both tactical planning and righteous anger channeled through proper legal channels. She's been playing neighborhood politics while we've been preparing federal prosecution, Marcus observed. Her social media harassment campaign actually helped establish documented patterns of bias against military personnel. The final preparation required theatrical precision. Ezra would attend this meeting as planned, sitting quietly while Veronica delivered her victory speech about property values and community leadership. Only when she called for questions would he stand, federal inspector badge visible, and begin the presentation that would end her criminal career. 3 days before the meeting, they conducted full dress rehearsal in the empty community center, testing audio equipment, projector angles, and camera positions for maximum documentation. Every detail was choreographed for legal protection and emotional impact. 3 days before the meeting, Veronica's desperation hit the air like the stench of burning plastic. At 6 a.m., Ezra watched through his kitchen window as she frantically loaded cardboard boxes into her BMW trunk, boxes that bore the unmistakable logo of Willowbrook HOA official records. Her manicured hands were actually shaking as she struggled with the weight. By noon, word spread faster than neighborhood gossip that the HOA office had suffered a catastrophic water leak, requiring immediate document disposal. The timing was so convenient it would have been hilarious if it weren't criminal. The sprinkler system had passed professional inspection 2 weeks prior, and the weather had been bone dry for a month. But desperation makes people stupid, and Veronica was proving that pharmaceutical money couldn't buy common sense. Delilah called that afternoon, her voice vibrating with barely contained excitement. "Ezra, dear, you absolutely must hear what that woman did this morning. I've been recording near the mailboxes, and she practically confessed to everything while thinking she was being clever." The audio quality was restaurant crystal clear, courtesy of Delilah's new hearing aid that apparently doubled as a surveillance device. Veronica's voice, breathless and panicked. "Emergency water damage, very unfortunate timing. All financial records from the past 3 years had to be disposed of for immediate health safety reasons." Male voice, gravelly. Nervous. Mrs. Grimm, those records are legally required to be archived with the county. State regulations clearly specify. Veronica, cutting him off with ice-cold authority. Clark, sweetie, we've discussed proper procedures before. Your cooperation has been very generously compensated. I trust you understand the importance of following my guidance on document disposal. Agent Valdez practically purred when she heard that recording. Meet Deputy County Clerk Clark Munson, she said, pulling up his personnel file. We've been wondering how she got advance warning about official inquiries. Turns out she's been buying inside information. But here's where Veronica's panic created beautiful irony. Federal building inspectors maintained independent access to county backup systems that local clerks couldn't touch. Every document she thought she'd destroyed existed in multiple federal databases. Her frantic cover-up was actually creating additional evidence of obstruction of justice. The water damage story disintegrated faster than wet cardboard. Maintenance records showed 0 plumbing issues, no emergency service calls, no insurance claims. 3 neighbors reported seeing Veronica herself spraying documents with her garden hose behind the community center, then stuffing soggy boxes into the dumpster like she was disposing of murder evidence. Meanwhile, her bribery attempts escalated to criminal comedy gold. That afternoon, Hank Granger called Ezra, his cigarette-roughened voice shaking with nervous laughter. Son, that pharmaceutical princess just offered me more money than I make in 6 months to lie about our conversations. Had my phone recording the whole thing because I learned to document crazy a long time ago. Hank's recordings revealed Veronica in full meltdown mode. Hank, you clearly don't comprehend your precarious situation. This unstable veteran represents genuine danger to community safety. For your business protection, and considering your facility's environmental compliance issues, you should testify that he made specific threats during his visit. Hank, deadpan. Lady, I got security cameras recording everything. Ain't no threats gonna magically appear on video. Veronica, voice climbing toward hysteria. $20,000, Hank, cash, today. Plus, I'll ensure the county environmental inspector finds absolutely no violations at your facility during future inspections. The recordings exposed a protection racket that would make organized crime bosses jealous. Veronica had been using regulatory threats to control local businesses, forcing cooperation through environmental harassment, licensing intimidation, and bureaucratic terrorism. But her fatal mistake came when she tried to bribe the wrong person. Mini twist. Deputy Clerk Munson, terrified by federal attention, contacted Agent Valdez directly. But instead of offering cooperation, he revealed something that made the entire case explode into organized crime territory. Veronica hadn't just bribed him, she'd been blackmailing him with photos of him accepting cash from other criminal enterprises. She's been running multiple corruption schemes simultaneously, Agent Valdez realized as Munson's testimony unfolded. Using one crime to leverage another, building a web of compromised officials across the entire county. Munson's records revealed systematic corruption spanning 2 years, suppressed investigations, destroyed evidence, manipulated regulatory inspections, and falsified official documents. Veronica had created a criminal empire by turning local government into her personal enforcement arm. The pharmaceutical money was just startup capital, Agent Valdez explained. She's been building a sustainable corruption machine that could have operated for decades. Each new revelation added federal charges: racketeering, conspiracy, money laundering, official corruption, witness tampering, and obstruction of justice. What started as car theft had metastasized into organized crime that threatened the integrity of local government itself. As they prepared for the final confrontation, Ezra realized his grandfather's stolen cars had accidentally exposed a cancer that went far deeper than anyone had imagined. Tomorrow night, Veronica's legacy celebration would become the public execution of a criminal enterprise that had infected an entire community. She thought she was untouchable, Agent Valdez noted grimly. Tomorrow she discovers that federal justice doesn't negotiate with pharmaceutical princesses. The morning before the HOA meeting, Veronica launched her final desperate gambit. Social media exploded with conspiracy theory posts that would make QAnon followers blush. Her Facebook account, normally reserved for wine photos and vacation bragging, transformed into a paranoid manifesto about deep state harassment and federal overreach targeting innocent community leaders. "Government agents infiltrating Willowbrook," screamed her 6 a.m. post, complete with grainy photos of Agent Valdez's unmarked sedan and wild theories about military-industrial complex retaliation. the comments section filled with neighbors expressing everything from confusion to outright alarm about federal investigators supposedly terrorizing their community. But desperation breeds stupidity, and Veronica's conspiracy theories accidentally revealed information she shouldn't have possessed. Her detailed knowledge of federal investigation procedures, specific agent names, and timeline details meant she'd been receiving inside information about law enforcement activities. Agent Valdez studied the posts with predatory fascination. She knows too much about our operation, she realized. Someone with federal access has been feeding her intelligence. The source became clear when Deputy Clerk Munson called in a panic. His voice shook like autumn leaves as he confessed to more than just local corruption. "She's got connections in the regional FBI field office," he whispered during an emergency meeting. "Special Agent Rebecca Sterling has been taking pharmaceutical money for 3 years, feeding Veronica advance warning about federal investigations. I've got bank records showing monthly payments disguised as security consulting fees." The corruption web suddenly made terrifying sense. Veronica hadn't just been bribing local officials. She'd been buying federal protection from someone with access to investigate databases and case files. Agent Sterling had been sabotaging investigations before they could gain momentum, ensuring Veronica stayed ahead of law enforcement. "This is why she's been so confident," Agent Valdez realized grimly. She thought she had federal immunity through a corrupt agent. Meanwhile, Veronica's financial desperation reached frantic levels. International wire transfer attempts pinged federal monitoring systems as she tried moving money to accounts in Switzerland, the Cayman Islands, and Malta. Every transaction was blocked by asset freezes, but her attempts provided additional evidence of flight risk and consciousness of guilt. The scent of fear was becoming palpable around Willowbrook. Neighbors reported seeing Veronica loading suitcases into her BMW at odd hours, only to return them to the house when she spotted security cameras. Her pharmaceutical confidence had cracked into something approaching genuine terror, but her most catastrophic mistake came that evening. Believing she still had federal protection through Agent Sterling, Veronica tried one final intimidation play. She showed up at Ezra's door at sunset, no longer the manicured HOA dictator, but something desperate and dangerous. Her designer clothes were wrinkled, her usually perfect hair disheveled, and her hands trembled as she clutched a manila envelope. "You have no idea what you're interfering with," she hissed, her voice carrying the sharp edge of someone who'd finally been cornered. Federal agents aren't the only ones with authority. Some of us have connections that go far beyond local investigations. Inside the envelope, photographs of Ezra's daily routines, his work schedule, his route to the grocery store. Someone had been conducting surveillance, documenting his movements with military precision. "Accidents happen to people who threaten established operations," Veronica continued, her pharmaceutical heiress mask finally slipping to reveal something genuinely sociopathic underneath. "Your grandfather's car accident might run in the family." The threat was explicit, recorded by security cameras and witnessed by Delilah, who'd been watering plants across the street. More importantly, it revealed that Veronica knew details about his grandfather's death that had never been public, suggesting her criminal network had been active far longer than anyone realized. Mini twist. As Veronica delivered her threat, Ezra noticed something that made his military training snap to full alert. The surveillance photos showed angles and timestamps that could only have been taken from inside federal buildings during his work hours. Someone with security clearance had been tracking a federal employee's movements. "Agent Valdez," he called immediately after Veronica left, "we have a problem. The surveillance photos show classified facility angles. Whoever's helping her has access to federal buildings." The investigation exploded into counterintelligence territory. Agent Sterling wasn't just taking bribes. She'd been conducting unauthorized surveillance of federal employees, accessing classified databases, and potentially compromising national security for pharmaceutical money. "This is treason adjacent," Agent Valdez realized. "Using federal resources to support criminal enterprises, surveilling other federal employees, compromising ongoing investigations. Sterling's looking at decades in federal prison." By midnight, federal marshals had Sterling in custody, her computer seized, her security clearance revoked, and her bank records subpoenaed. The corrupt agent's cooperation agreement came within hours. She provided complete documentation of her 3-year criminal partnership with Veronica in exchange for reduced sentences. "Veronica's lost her federal protection," Agent Valdez announced. No more advance warnings, no more inside information, no more corrupt safety net. Tomorrow she faces justice without pharmaceutical shields or federal corruption. As dawn broke on the day of the HOA meeting, Ezra felt the weight of complete victory approaching. Veronica had spent years believing money and corruption made her untouchable. Tonight, she'd discover that some battles couldn't be won with bribes, threats, or federal corruption. Some enemies fought back with righteous anger and absolutely legal authority. The Willowbrook Community Center had never hosted anything like this. By 7 p.m., every folding chair was occupied, with overflow crowds standing along the walls like witnesses to a public execution. The air hummed with anticipation and the metallic scent of nervous sweat. 89 households represented, the largest turnout in subdivision history. Local news cameras positioned themselves discreetly along the back wall, their red recording lights blinking like electronic vultures. Marcus Rory had coordinated with 3 television stations and 2 newspapers, ensuring maximum coverage of what he'd promised would be the HOA corruption story of the decade. Veronica entered wearing armor disguised as a designer suit, cream-colored silk that probably cost more than most families' monthly mortgage payments. Her pharmaceutical money confidence had been restored overnight, her posture radiating the arrogance of someone who believed herself untouchable once again. She had no idea that her federal protection had been arrested 12 hours earlier. "Welcome to our annual celebration of community achievement," she began, her voice carrying across the packed room with practiced authority. "Another year of successful property value enhancement, neighborhood beautification, and quality of life improvements that make Willowbrook the envy of surrounding communities." The audience applauded politely, unaware they were clapping for systematic theft and organized crime. Veronica basked in the approval, her smile sharp enough to cut glass as she detailed fake accomplishments funded by stolen military property. "Our landscape enhancement projects, security improvements, and administrative efficiency have saved every household thousands in property value protection," she continued, clicking through a PowerPoint presentation filled with fictional achievements and fraudulent financial summaries. Ezra sat in the third row, wearing his grandfather's Purple Heart on his civilian jacket, feeling the weight of federal authority and righteous anger building in his chest. Agent Valdez had positioned herself near the exit, unmarked federal vehicles waiting outside with engines running. 20 minutes into Veronica's victory speech, she opened the floor for questions. The moment had arrived. Ezra stood slowly, and the room's energy shifted like storm pressure building before lightning strikes. Conversations died, heads turned, the weight of attention focused on the veteran who'd been painted as unstable and dangerous. "I have a question about financial transparency," he said, his voice carrying the calm authority of someone who'd learned command presence from Marine instructors. Veronica's confident smile faltered slightly. "Of course, Ezra. Though I hope we can keep this productive and appropriate." Instead of answering, Ezra reached into his jacket and pulled out his federal building inspector credentials, holding them high enough for the entire audience to see. The badge caught fluorescent light like a beacon, and Veronica's face went dead white. "My name is Ezra Blackwood, and I'm a federal building inspector with specialized training in municipal fraud investigation," he announced. "What Mrs. Grimm doesn't know is that for the past month, I've been working with IRS, criminal investigation, Treasury Department agents, and federal prosecutors to document the largest HOA theft ring in state history." The room erupted in shocked murmurs, but Ezra's voice cut through the noise. "Mrs. Grimm has systematically stolen over $4 million from military families across 7 states using fake HOA authority to take property from deployed servicemen and women who couldn't defend themselves." Veronica stood frozen behind the podium, her pharmaceutical confidence crumbling like a house of cards in hurricane winds. Her mouth opened and closed soundlessly, designer suit suddenly looking like expensive camouflage for a cornered animal. Marcus Rory activated the projector, and the screen filled with devastating evidence: photos of stolen cars, forged signatures, bank transfer records, offshore account documentation, and recordings of Veronica bragging about targeting government slaves. "Every family in this room has been paying HOA fees that were stolen for personal use," Ezra continued, his voice growing stronger with each revelation. "Playground improvements that funded her BMW, security consulting that paid for kitchen renovations, administrative costs that covered legal fees for harassing other families." The audience's shocked silence transformed into angry murmurs as evidence cascaded across the screen. Neighbors who'd trusted Veronica for years realized they'd been living under systematic criminal exploitation. Agent Valdez stepped forward, federal credentials visible. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Agent Patricia Valdez with IRS Criminal Investigation. Mrs. Veronica Grimm, you're under arrest for money laundering, conspiracy to commit fraud, theft under color of authority, and violation of the Service Members Civil Relief Act." The metallic click of handcuffs echoed through the silent room as Veronica's empire collapsed in front of 89 witnesses and 3 television cameras. Her designer purse hit the floor with a solid thunk, spilling pharmaceutical money and offshore account documentation across industrial carpet. "You have the right to remain silent," Agent Valdez continued, her voice carrying the satisfaction of justice finally delivered. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in federal court." The room exploded in applause as neighbors realized they'd been liberated from a criminal who'd been stealing from them for years. Several residents stood to applaud Ezra directly, their gratitude mixing with shame for believing Veronica's character assassination campaign. "This is what happens," Ezra said as federal marshals led Veronica away in handcuffs, "when you steal from the wrong veteran." 6 months later, Willowbrook looked like a different community entirely. The federal investigation had recovered $347,000 in stolen HOA funds, plus another $890,000 from Veronica's offshore accounts and seized assets. But more importantly, it had restored something that money couldn't buy: trust, unity, and genuine community spirit. The Grandfather Joe Memorial Veterans Fund became the crown jewel of recovery. Using Veronica's seized BMW proceeds and pharmaceutical inheritance money, the fund provided legal protection and property monitoring for military families during deployments. 12 states had already requested similar programs, and Congress was drafting legislation to make veteran property protection a federal mandate. Ezra's garage had transformed into weekend headquarters for the Willowbrook Classic Car Restoration Club. Every Saturday morning, the sound of socket wrenches and friendly laughter filled the air as neighbors gathered to work on automotive projects together. Kids learned about engine timing and carburetor adjustment, while their parents discovered the therapeutic joy of bringing dead metal back to roaring life. The centerpiece was a pristine 1967 Mustang, identical to his grandfather's stolen car, donated by a collector in Phoenix who'd read the story and wanted to contribute to justice. Community volunteers had restored it to showroom condition, and it now served as the mobile centerpiece for veteran memorial events across 3 counties. "Your grandfather would be proud," Delilah said one Saturday morning, watching Ezra teach 8-year-old Tommy Martinez how to properly torque cylinder head bolts. His cars became the foundation for protecting hundreds of other military families. The legal aftermath was equally satisfying. Veronica received 8 years in federal prison plus $3 million in restitution payments. The corrupt FBI agent Sterling got 12 years for treason-related charges. Deputy Clerk Munson received 3 years probation in exchange for testifying against 17 other officials in the corruption network. But the most meaningful victory was legislative. The Blackwood Act now provided federal oversight for all HOA emergency actions affecting military personnel, requiring 60% community approval and federal notification for any property-related enforcement during deployments. No other veteran would face what Ezra had endured. Marcus Rory's investigative series won a regional journalism award and sparked congressional hearings into HOA corruption nationwide. His follow-up investigation uncovered similar theft rings in 47 communities, leading to federal legislation requiring annual HOA financial audits and public transparency reporting. Operation Clean Sweep became the template for federal investigators tracking organized HOA fraud. The techniques Ezra had developed, cross-referencing municipal databases, identifying money laundering patterns, documenting systematic targeting, were now taught at Treasury Department training academies. The community healing extended beyond financial recovery. Monthly neighborhood gatherings in the Memorial Garden created connections that transcended the superficial politeness of suburban living. Real friendships formed over shared outrage at having been deceived, mutual respect for Ezra's courage, and collective determination to protect their community from future predators. The Willowbrook Veterans Memorial Garden featured restored military vehicles from every branch of service, creating a rolling museum that honored local heroes while providing hands-on educational opportunities for children. The restored Camaro, recovered from that collector in Phoenix, served as the garden's centerpiece, its racing stripes gleaming under memorial spotlights. Most importantly, Ezra had rediscovered something he'd lost when his grandfather died. The sense that working with your hands alongside people you trusted could create something larger than individual effort. The garage smelled like motor oil and possibility again, filled with the sound of tools and laughter instead of lonely silence. "You know what the best part is?" Ezra asked Agent Valdez during the garden's dedication ceremony. Veronica thought she was stealing cars. Instead, she accidentally brought together a community that will protect veterans for generations. The dedication ceremony concluded with the traditional military missing man formation. 4 classic cars driving in formation with one empty space representing fallen heroes. As engines rumbled past the memorial garden, children waved small American flags while their parents wiped away tears of gratitude.